Tonight, I've got something that'll make you question everything. No shaky footage, no campfire nonsense. This is a raw, unfiltered confession. She says Bigfoot watched her grow up in the mountains of Washington state, stayed through the darkest chapters of her life, and after decades of encounters that'll freeze your blood, he died in her arms. She buried him beside his own child. And here's what'll haunt you, she has proof. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button right now. Because after this story, you won't be asking, is Bigfoot real? You'll be asking, what happens when he chooses you? Let's dive in. I know the exact day Bigfoot died. People laugh when I say that. They roll their eyes. But I remember the dirt caked under my nails, the impossible weight of the shovel, the sound his massive chest made when it stopped moving. That wasn't a bear. That wasn't folklore. That was me, on my knees in the Washington mud, burying something that had been my silent guardian for over 2 decades. So when people treat Bigfoot like a punchline, I stay quiet. Until now. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 37. I run a logistics company in Snoqualmie, Washington. I do normal things: grocery runs, Zoom calls, quarterly reports. But underneath that life, there's another one. A hidden floor nobody knows exists. That life started in the dense forests outside our town when I was 12 years old. And it followed me into adulthood like a shadow that breathed. And if you think this sounds insane, trust me, I wish you were right. The girl in the woods. I grew up on the edge of Snoqualmie. Not the tourist part, the raw edge where backyards end in blackberry thickets and then just forest. Miles of Douglas fir, western red cedar, and hemlock, climbing toward the Cascade foothills like a living wall. My parents owned Mitchell Freight Solutions, a mid-sized trucking company with our name on every rig. On paper, we looked perfect. Inside our house, constant warfare. Screaming matches about money, control, who sacrificed more for the business, who loved me less. I could tell you which floorboard creaked when my dad stormed past my room at 2 a.m., which cabinet door slammed when Mom made her I'm fine coffee after a brutal fight. So I escaped to the woods. At first, just the backyard. Then the rough trails deer made. By 12, I knew those woods better than most adults. Every creek crossing, every rotting log, every hidden clearing. That's when I started feeling watched. Not movie watched, with dramatic music and cold chills. More like your brain doing double takes. I'd be walking and suddenly realize, why haven't I heard a bird in 5 minutes? Or I'd tie my shoe and feel this pressure between my shoulder blades, like invisible eyes drilling into me. The first time I really felt it, I was sitting on a fallen cedar near our property line. Late afternoon, early summer. Golden light slicing through branches. Everything smelled like warm sap and earth. My legs swung as I pretended to read, really just avoiding home. Then, I looked up. 30 yards away, there was a gap between trees. I didn't see a shape or glowing eyes, but I knew as clearly as I knew my own name, something was standing just out of sight. Tall enough it had to lean behind the trunk. Close enough to see my face perfectly. I told myself, deer. I told myself that a lot that summer. The watching gets louder. By 15, our house felt like a live grenade. My parents' voices could go from calm to explosive in seconds. Plates shattered. Doors rattled windows. When it got unbearable, I'd slip out the back and disappear into those trees, sometimes without a jacket, desperate for distance. The day I saw him clearly, I wasn't thinking about monsters. I wasn't thinking at all. I'd walked to my clearing, a small dip between trees where sunlight pooled. I called it my place. Dramatic, I know. But it felt like the only space that was mine. I was crying. Hard. The ugly kind, where you can't catch your breath. My chest hurt from holding it in at home. I was 15, and my entire existence felt like survival mode until the next explosion. Then, crack. Not a twig. A branch. Behind me. To the left. The kind of sound that turns your body to stone before your brain catches up. I turned my head slowly, terrified of triggering whatever it was. He stepped out like he'd always been there. Everyone wants specifics. Height? My brain thought telephone pole before it thought person. Taller than any human I've met. Shoulders as wide as my dad's F-250. Dark hair everywhere matted. Clumped like it had been soaked and dried repeatedly. But what hit me first? The space he occupied. How he made the forest feel smaller just by existing. Like the trees were suddenly too thin beside him. His eyes, though. Dark. Deep set. not empty. They weren't predator eyes sizing up prey. They were concerned. Like my grandma used to look at me when she knew something was wrong but didn't want to scare me by asking. I broke. I started sobbing, panicked, ugly, animal sounds. I curled into myself, covered my face like a child. I thought he'd charge, tear me apart. Instead, I heard this low sound in his chest, a rumble. I flinched, waiting for claws, teeth, pain, but the sound softened. I peeked through my fingers. He'd stepped back, not forward, back. His arms lifted slightly, palms out, like cops do when they say, "Easy, easy." He moved so slowly I could hear his breathing over mine. For a few seconds, we just stared. Me, on a rock, face wet, nose running. Him, an impossible creature, leaning away from me like I was the threat. Then he stepped sideways and melted into the trees. No roar, no chase, just heavy footfalls fading into silence. I ran home on legs that felt disconnected from my body. I convinced myself I'd had a breakdown, projected my fear onto the woods. I didn't tell anyone. 5-year-old girls already feel crazy. Add, "I saw Bigfoot," and you might as well tattoo "attention seeker" on your forehead. But something changed. The feeling of being watched wasn't vague anymore. It had a shape, a height, eyes I could picture whenever I walked under those trees. And deep down, I felt safer. The divorce, the cabin, and the gifts. At 18, my parents finally did it. They divorced. Not clean. It was like watching a company split with a chainsaw. Lawyers, court battles, whispered phone calls behind locked doors. In the end, Dad kept the house and majority stake in Mitchell Freight. Mom got a smaller share in a condo in town. I got sent to Grandma Helen's cabin in the deeper woods outside Snoqualmie. Just until things settled, they said. The cabin was small, 1 bedroom, a loft, creaky kitchen cabinets, and a wood stove that made everything smell like smoke and chamomile tea. Behind it, the land dropped to a creek. The forest there was dense, the kind where if you walk far enough, you stop hearing the highway entirely. At first, it felt like exile. 18, angry, stuck with spotty cell service, and a woman who thought 8 p.m. was late. But Grandma Helen didn't yell. She moved slow, hummed when she cooked, had little rituals like tapping the doorframe twice before stepping outside, or leaving an apple at the forest edge once a week. "For the deer," she'd say. But her tone suggested it was only half true. The signs started immediately. The knocks. First week, I woke at 2 a.m. to something hitting the cabin wall. Not wind, not random. Testing. Thud. Pause it. Thud. Thud. Then, heavy footsteps circling the cabin. Not four-legged. Not light like raccoons. Just thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, massive. I told myself, bear. Next morning, there were prints in the mud by the back steps. I didn't measure them. Didn't photograph them like a smart person would today. I just stood there in socks, staring. They were huge, long, narrow toes, way bigger than my foot. The gifts, then came the offerings. A deer antler on the back step, clean, smooth, weathered. 3 flat stones stacked in a perfect little tower. Wildflowers laid across the step, all stems facing the same direction. Grandma assumed a dog. But there were no dogs out there. I knew. So I did something stupid, or maybe brave. I started talking to him again. The creek confessions. Most evenings after dinner, I'd walk down to the creek. The path was short but steep. Even in summer, the water ran cold and fast over smooth stones. I'd stand on a flat rock and just talk. At first, vague stuff. Long day. Tired. Then, as weeks turned to months, I told the truth. About my parents. About feeling like abandoned luggage. About being terrified I'd turn out like them. The first time I realized he was really there, I didn't see him. I was standing on that rock, arms wrapped around myself because the air was freezing off the water. I'd just said aloud, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." From behind me 20 feet back in the trees, I heard that same low chest sound from when I was 15. Not a growl, not a word. Just a long, steady exhale that vibrated. Every hair on my body stood up. "I know you're there," I said, voice shaking. Silence. "I remember you. From before." I don't know what possessed me, but I whistled 2 soft notes, like calling a shy dog. Leaves shifted behind me. Not closer, just adjusting. Then again, that low hum, like someone humming in their chest. I stood there a long time, watching the water, talking to my own reflection. I never turned around. I think I knew that if I saw him full on again, something would change permanently. But from that point on, he was there. If I went down angry, I'd hear more movement branches snapping, pacing. If I went down sad, he was quieter. Just the sense of something massive holding perfectly still. I started using the whistle as a check-in. 2 notes if I was okay. Just my voice if I wasn't. I can't prove it meant anything to him, but it felt like it did. It felt like I wasn't alone. Years pass. The shape between trees. Years blurred. I got my GED. Took community college classes. My parents' divorce settled into cold detente. I started handling small parts of Mitchell Freight, remotely bookkeeping, scheduling from the cabin. It was a strange life. Half adult, half ghost. The encounters got less subtle. I'd be stacking firewood and feel that pressure again, that watched feeling. When I turned, there'd be a dark vertical shape between trees where no tree should be. Sometimes, if I stared long enough, it would step sideways and vanish. One winter, a power outage lasted 3 days. Roads iced over. Grandma fell asleep early by the wood stove. I stood at the back door, listening. No wind, no rain. Just that heavy, muffled quiet that comes with snow. Then, knock, knock, knock. Clear as someone rapping on glass. I opened the door. Cold slapped me. My breath clouded. I couldn't see him, but I saw the tracks. Big, round impressions punching through 6 inches of snow, leading from the tree line to the edge of the yard. 3 knocks. 3 steps away. Like he was saying, "I know you're in there. I'm here too." I almost called out. But he didn't have a name, so I whistled. The sound came out thin in the frozen air, echoed off trees, came back smaller. For a second, nothing. Then, heavy steps in snow angling away, not toward the cabin. He left. It was the first time I felt safe, because of him. Not safe, from him. That distinction wouldn't last. The camping trip, when he revealed himself. Fast forward, early 20seconds, still at the cabin. Still working remotely. Once a month I'd go into the Mitchell Freight office, sit through meetings, smile politely, then sprint back to the woods. People in town knew me as the quiet girl who lives with her grandma. I kept in touch with a handful of old school friends online. They'd try pulling me out for plans. I'd dodge. Then one summer, I caved. They planned a weekend camping trip about an hour out. Dispersed camping area near Old Logging Road. 4 of us. Me, 2 girls I'd grown up with, and Jenna, a friend of a friend I barely knew. We drove out Friday afternoon in an SUV loaded with cheap gear and too much alcohol. They were loud, excited. I was trying. We set up camp in a clearing near a creek. Not my creek, different one. But it had that same sound. By dark, we'd made a fire, cooked hot dogs. Everyone had a few drinks. The sky was clear enough to see stars when the smoke shifted. I remember thinking in this detached way, he could be anywhere out there right now. I hadn't thought through what it meant to bring other people into his woods. We sat around the fire telling stories. Eventually, conversation drifted to high school. One girl started teasing me how I'd disappear at lunch, how I always seemed half somewhere else. Mostly good-natured. Then Jenna, who barely knew me, chimed in. She was always weird. I heard she talks to trees. Quiet, creepy Sarah. You still do that? Still wandering around out there pretending you're some forest witch? The words landed harder than she meant. The others laughed, but it had that edge. That we're all thinking it energy. I laughed too, because that's what you do. But my face got hot. I stared into the fire so they wouldn't see. "Leave her alone," one of the others said, half-hearted. "I'm just saying," Jenna went on. "No wonder she never brings anyone around. She's probably married to a tree out there." Such a stupid joke. If you wrote it in a script, people would say it's too obvious. I didn't respond. I went quiet. My chest did that tight thing it used to do during my parents' fights. The sounds around the fire blurred. I heard the creak louder than the people. I didn't think about him hearing it. Not then. Midnight. The scream. We went to bed late. Fire burned to coals. The others passed out in a pile of sleeping bags. I lay there staring at nylon ceiling, feeling that old urge to escape. Sometime after midnight, Jenna got up to pee. I heard the zipper. Crunch of footsteps. Brush moving. I figured she'd go behind a tree and come back. I rolled over, trying to get comfortable. Then, one short scream. Not playful, not drunk. Real. From the gut scream that cut off fast. The tent exploded into panic. Someone sat up and hit me in the face. Someone swore. We fumbled for flashlights, for the zipper. My heart was in my throat. I was halfway out when the second scream came higher, choked. Coming from the trees to the right, I ran toward it before I could think. My flashlight beam jerked over branches, trunks, empty air. My breath was too loud. My brain screamed, "Bear, bear, bear," but my legs didn't listen. I broke through shrubs and almost collided with her. Jenna was backed against a tree, hands out, eyes wide, facing something. Then I saw him. He was closer than he'd ever been since I was 15. 10, maybe 15 feet from her. Shoulders hunched, arms slightly away from his sides like he was mid-step. Head lowered, eyes locked on her. He looked bigger at night. Without background detail, he was just this wall of darkness that ate my flashlight beam. He moved, not a full charge, more like a fast step forward, enough to make her flinch and press into bar. She screamed again, broken, strangled. I don't know where it came from, but I whistled. The same 2 notes I'd used for years. He stopped. Instant. Like someone hit pause. His head snapped toward me. Eyes caught the light for a second amber, not red. My chest was heaving. My friends were behind me yelling, but it all sounded distant. The only clear thing was the distance between me and him. "Stop," I said, voice shaking. He didn't move. We stared at each other, me in pajamas and borrowed boots. Him, this massive shape, breathing hard enough I could see his chest moving. For a second, I thought he'd ignore me and keep going. Then his shoulders dropped, just a fraction. He made that low sound again, more like a groan this time. He looked at Jenna once more, then took a step backward, then another. Then he turned not all the way, just enough to move off at an angle, putting trees between us. In 3 or 4 strides, he was gone. The others rushed forward, grabbing Jenna, half dragging her back to camp. She was shaking so hard her teeth knocked together. "It was huge," she kept repeating. "It was huge." "What was it?" one of the girls demanded. "A bear," someone said. "Had to be a bear?" "That was not a bear," Jenna snapped, voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "It was standing up. It had hands." They argued all the way back. I walked in silence, the whistle still tingling in my mouth. Back at camp, flashlights everywhere. Everyone talked over each other. Words like Bigfoot and Psycho in a suit got thrown around, always with nervous laughter. Like making it a joke made it less real. I didn't say a word. By morning, they decided she'd been drunk and scared herself. She insisted she hadn't. We broke camp early. On the drive back, the car was silent. They dropped me at the turnoff to Grandma's road. As soon as their car disappeared, I headed straight for the spot by the creek where I knew he usually watched from. I didn't hesitate. I walked right up to the tree line and stared into shadows. "What the hell was that?" I said. "What were you doing?" My voice sounded too loud. I felt him before I saw movement. That same pressure, that heaviness. He stepped out from behind a tree slowly, not all the way, just enough that I could see his outline. For the first time, I noticed something like emotion on his face. Not human emotion exactly, but close enough my brain tried to match it. His head was tilted down, shoulders forward. The big, scary posture from last night? Gone. The sound he made this time hurt to listen to. Low, long, rising, then falling like a sigh. There was weight in it I hadn't heard before. Not anger, not threat, grief. It hit me physically. My chest tightened, stomach twisted. "You scared her," I said. "You scared her so bad. She's never coming back out here." He shifted weight from one foot to the other. His hands hung at his sides, fingers flexing. "I don't understand you," I said, meaning it more than I can explain. "Are you trying to protect me? Are you trying to keep me for yourself? What are you doing?" He made another sound shorter, almost like a whine. I took a step back. For the first time since I was 18, I was more afraid of him than of everything else. "I can't do this," I said. "You can't scare people for me. You can't hurt people just because they're mean." His head lifted at that word, mean, like he recognized the tone, if not the meaning. Then he turned without warning and started walking. Not away, deeper. He kept glancing back like he wanted me to follow. I stood there, undecided, then swore under my breath and went after him. The grave. We walked in silence. His strides were longer. Every step sounded like dropping a sandbag. Branches that would have whipped my face just flexed around him. After a few minutes, the forest opened into a small clearing I'd never seen. Not much, just whiter light where trees happened to be farther apart. Ground was softer, more moss than needles. He stopped near the center. For a second, I didn't see it. Then my eyes adjusted. The ground in front of him wasn't flat. There was a mound, not big, maybe the size of a small child curled up, covered in moss and low flowers. It didn't look fresh. This had been there a while. My brain caught up before my heart did. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at that mound, shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen. Lines of his body weren't threatening or defensive. They were defeated. It hit me then. This was a grave. This was his grave. For his child. The thought came so fast it made me dizzy. I don't have evidence. I didn't dig. It just made too much sense. The size, the care, the way he was standing. Something in me cracked. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't know if I meant for him or for whatever was under the dirt." He made that sound again. The one from the creek. The one that vibrated in your bones more than your ears. If you pressed me, I'd say it sounded like a parent who'd already done all the crying they could do. We stood there a long time. Time felt weird in that clearing. Eventually, he turned and walked away. He didn't look back. I found my way home alone. The man who almost ruined me. If the story ended there, it would already be more than I could explain. It didn't. By 32, my life on paper looked stable. Grandma Helen passed away peacefully one winter. I inherited the cabin and a bigger chunk of Mitchell freight. My dad, older and tired, started working from home more. I took on more responsibility. When he had a health scare, I became CEO. People assume that's glamorous. It's not. Being CEO of a small-town company is mostly spreadsheets, phone calls, and trying not to lay people off. I chose to stay at the cabin. We rigged up better internet, got a generator. I drove into the office a few times a month, then always came back to the trees. Employees called me the hermit boss, behind my back. I didn't mind. I told myself I stayed because it was cheap, peaceful, quiet. The truth? I didn't know how to live anywhere else. My relationship with him, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever had settled into this strange rhythm. I saw him every few days. Sometimes just a shadow at the tree line. Sometimes, if the day had been rough, a closer presence. I'd come home from brutal meetings and find another little stack of stones on the porch, or hear a single knock as I walked to the creek. It was messed up, I know, but he was dependable. Then I met Derry. We met at a regional business mixer, held in the back room of an Applebee's off I-90, with sad appetizers and warm beer. He was charming, that's what everyone said. Tall, nice smile, good suit, worked in finance consulting for companies like mine. He'd grown up in Seattle and talked about it like another planet. He zeroed in on me pretty fast, asked thoughtful questions about the business, made jokes that weren't mean. When I mentioned the cabin, he didn't make the usual, "So you're a recluse," comment. He just said it sounded peaceful. I didn't tell him about the other resident. We started dating. Slow at first, dinners in town, walks. Then he started staying over on weekends. Complained about spotty service, but called it charming. For a while, it felt good. Normal, like I was finally connecting to a human being instead of a shadow in the trees. The shift was gradual. First time he snapped at me? About nothing. I'd forgotten to answer a text fast enough. He went quiet, then made some comment about respecting people's time. I brushed it off. Then, little criticisms. My clothes, my reluctance to attend networking events, the way I deferred to older employees, always framed as, "I'm just trying to help you be better." He started making more suggestions about the company. Push harder here. Cut this department. Raise prices there. Some ideas were fine. Some weren't. When I pushed back, he'd go cold. We got engaged after a year. On paper, it made sense. I was early 32nds. He looked good next to me in photos. Our families liked the idea. Employees seemed relieved I was doing something normal. Once the ring was on, everything sped up. He wanted me in the office more. Wanted to modernize the cabin, aka move us into town. Started keeping closer tabs on my calendar, helping by arranging meetings I didn't ask for. The criticisms got sharper. "You're too soft. You're too isolated. You let people walk over you. It's embarrassing." It's embarrassing to admit how long I put up with it. But when you grow up around constant yelling, someone being quietly cruel can feel almost gentle. He never hit me. I want that clear. There were no bruises. From the outside, it looked fine, maybe a little tense. The night everything changed, the night it all broke, he broke something else. It was late. He'd come out to the cabin after a long week for both of us. We'd argued about finances. He wanted me to rework the ownership structure, put more in both our names. For tax reasons. I said no. He snapped. Not yelling like my parents, not chaotic. It was focused, laser sharp. Called me selfish, paranoid, useless without him. Said I'd be nothing but some freak in the woods if he hadn't come along. The words hit places in me I didn't know were still raw. I want to break off the engagement, I said. It was like flipping a switch. His face went blank. Then he laughed. Not the nice laugh. The other one. You're not serious, he said. I am, I said, hand shaking. I can't do this. He kept laughing, but his eyes didn't match. He stepped closer, crowding me back toward the kitchen counter. You think anyone else is going to put up with you? He said. Out here, hiding, talking to trees? The phrase landed like a slap. Talking to trees. I hadn't told him that phrase. Someone else must have. Or maybe it's just the easy joke. I pushed past him and went to the front door. I need you to leave, I said. Now. He followed me onto the porch. Air was cold. Late fall. You could see your breath. Stars sharp overhead. Trees at the yard edge were just dark shapes. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Voice too calm now. That scared me more than shouting. You don't get to throw away everything we've built because you're having a mood. He grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to send a message. No, I snapped, pulling back. We struggled for a second. Not dramatic. No one went flying. He just tightened his grip, leaned in close, and hissed in my ear. If you ruin this, I ruin you. You have no idea what I can do. Financially? Reputation? Physically? Maybe all of it. Behind him, from the tree line, something moved. We both froze. Not subtle. A branch broke. Another. You could hear the weight behind it. Derek turned his head, squinting into the dark. What the hell was that? My heart was pounding so hard I thought I'd throw up. Probably a bear, I said automatically. Then, the roar. I don't have a better word. It was deep and loud and close enough I felt it in my chest. Not a lion roar like movies. Rougher. Broken at the edges. Like someone with a damaged throat screaming through it. Derek flinched. Get inside, I said. For once, he listened. We went back in, locked the door. He grabbed the big flashlight, shone it into the yard. Beam cut through dark catching branches. The stump. Metal trash can. Nothing. He swore under his breath. Damn bear. You really live out here with this? I barely slept that night. Lay awake listening. Once, around 3 a.m., I heard something heavy move past the back of the house. Just once. Then silence. 3 days later, Derek was sweet the next morning. Apologetic. Blamed alcohol. Stress. Said he loved me. Said we'd figure it out. I wanted to believe him. I really did. 3 days later, the cops came. Late afternoon. Gray sky. Thin mist soaking everything slowly. I saw the cruiser from the kitchen window. My stomach dropped. 2 officers, both local. I knew their faces. Sarah, the older one said when I opened the door. His hat was dripping. Can we come in for a minute? My first thought. Something happened to Dad. Heart attack. Car crash. My chest tightened. It's about Derek Harper, the younger one said. My legs went weak. They sat me at the table. Older one talked. Younger one watched my face. They'd found Derek's car at a trailhead a few miles away. Found his body off the trail, down a small embankment. It looked, they said, like an animal attack. Black bear, most likely, the older one said. We've had sightings this season. I stared at his hands. Big knuckles. Small burn mark on one finger. What happened? He gave me pieces. Never the whole thing. Just fragments your brain fills in. Mauled. Claw marks. Bites. Clothes torn. I heard the words. They didn't land right. They slid around in my head. My mind was already out in the woods, back on the porch, hearing that roar. Did you two have a fight recently? The younger one asked gently. Any reason he'd go out there alone? I swallowed, throat dry. We argued, I said. Lying seemed pointless. About work, about the engagement. Did he seem upset? Yes, I said. He was upset. They nodded like that fit whatever they'd decided. Asked a few more questions. Where I'd been that morning. If anyone was with me. Standard stuff. Then they were gone. I stood at the window, watching their car bounce back down the gravel road, and let the truth slide into place. It wasn't a bear. I knew it in my bones. It was the roar that came right after Derek's threat. The way the woods had gone silent. The way I'd felt that pressure, that watchful presence just before it happened. He had seen, he had heard. and he had done something about it. People talk about wanting someone to protect them. It sounds romantic, sounds safe, until you realize what protection looks like when it comes from something that doesn't understand your laws, your consequences, your conscience. My first reaction wasn't relief. It wasn't even fear. It was guilt. He had killed for me, or because of me, or in my name. The wording doesn't matter. The result did. The confrontation. I lasted about an hour before I went looking for him. I didn't go to the creek this time. I went straight toward the grave clearing. My feet knew the way. Trees closed around me. Every sound was too loud, branches breaking under boots, my own breathing. By the time I stepped into the clearing, my hands were shaking. He was already there. He stood on the far side of the mound, half in shadow, watching me. His fur was slick in places like he'd been in rain, or something else. I didn't look too closely. For a second, my brain did that thing. It always did, the little flicker of comfort. Then the image of Derek's body flashed behind my eyes, and it was like someone pulled a rug out. "What did you do?" I said. Words came out louder than I meant. They bounced off trees. He didn't move. Made that sound again. I used to hear warmth in it. Now it just sounded like a confession. "You can't do that," I said, voice breaking. "You can't kill people. You can't decide who gets to live because they were mean to me." He shifted weight. Head tilted slightly the way it did when he tried to understand. "I didn't ask you to," I said. "I never ask you to do that." My chest hurt. Tears spilled down my face, hot and cold air. I wasn't even sure who I was crying for. Derek. Myself. Whatever he'd lost in this graveyard of a life. "I thought you were keeping me company," I said, "not owning me." He took a small step forward. I flinched. Automatic. My whole body tensed, ready to run. He froze. We stared at each other. There was so much in that moment I wish I could translate. The way his shoulders sagged, the way his hands opened and closed, the way his eyes looked confused. Hurt. Hurt like a dog that doesn't understand why you're yelling when it just brought you a present. "I can't stay," I said. "Not here. Not with you." The sound he made then was sharper, shorter, almost a bark. Not angry, panicked. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. I don't remember the walk back. I must have taken the same path, but it felt like stepping through water. Everything muffled. That night, I packed a bag. Within a week, I'd rented a small apartment in Snoqualmie. Cheap, noisy, above a pizza place. I moved essential work stuff into a spare office. Told everyone it was for accessibility and efficiency. I kept the cabin. Told myself I'd use it on weekends. I didn't go back. 2 years of silence. 2 years is a funny amount of time. Long enough people stop asking if you're okay. Short enough, everything still feels recent. I built a life in town, or something that looked like one. I learned my neighbors' habits. Guy downstairs smoked on back steps every night at 9. Woman across the hall played true crime podcasts too loud. Kids next building practiced trumpet at weird hours. I threw myself into work. Employees from that period probably say I was more focused, sharper. I made good decisions, grew the business, attended conferences, learned to talk to people on their terms. I saw a therapist for a while. Didn't tell her about him. Talked about my parents, Grandma Helen, Derek. She used words like trauma, attachment issues, hypervigilance, suggested grounding exercises, breathing techniques. None of it felt like it applied when you're talking about something that can uproot a sapling. I slept with the TV on most nights. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because, in silence, I'd hear phantom knocks. Imagine footsteps, breathing that wasn't mine. I stayed away from the cabin. I'd drive out every couple months, park by the road, check the mailbox, walk in just far enough to make sure nobody had broken in. Never stayed more than an hour. Never went down to the creek. The grave clearing haunted my dreams. Sometimes the mound was dug up, sometimes it was bigger. Sometimes there were more of them. I told myself he was fine, that he'd move on, that I was just a weird chapter in whatever long life he had out there. The return. Then autumn came around again. I don't know what made that day different. Wasn't an anniversary. Wasn't Derek's death date. I didn't know that yet. It was just quiet. Office was slow, inbox under control. I'd slept okay. I woke up with this feeling like there was a weight on my chest that wouldn't move unless I did something about it. At lunch, instead of going to the usual spot, I got in my car and drove toward the cabin. The closer I got, the more everything in me screamed to turn around. My hands shook on the wheel. I had to stop once on the roadside to breathe, but I kept going. The cabin looked the same from outside, maybe more weathered. Moss creeping higher on the roof, needles piled thicker in the yard. Air smelled like wet leaves and old smoke. I didn't go in. I walked past it, straight toward the path that led to the grave clearing. My heart was pounding. Every crunch of leaves under boots sounded like a gunshot. I kept expecting to see him between trees. A shadow, movement, anything. I saw nothing. By the time I stepped into the clearing, my mouth was dry, hands numb. He was there. For a second, my brain thought I was seeing another grave, another mound. Then the shape moved. He was lying on his side next to the small mound. He looked smaller. I don't mean he'd shrunk. He was still huge by any human standard. But the mass had changed. Fur was thinner, patchy, shot through with gray. Lines of muscle underneath weren't as defined. His breathing was shallow chest, rising and falling in uneven stutters. His eyes tracked me as I stepped closer. I froze a few feet away. There was no roar, no movement, no attempt to stand. Just that rasping breath and the faint, familiar smell of earth, sweat, and something else I'd never been able to identify. I sank to my knees. For a second, all the anger I'd been holding flickered. Derek's face flashed. Jenna pressed against that tree. The gifts on the porch. Prints in snow. My 5-year-old self crying while something stepped back not to scare her. I told myself you were fine, I said. Voice sounded wrong in the quiet. I thought you'd forget me. His eyes didn't close. They just softened. His head tilted a fraction like always. I was scared of you, I said. I still am. The truth tasted bitter. I don't know how to do life without you. Isn't that messed up? I reached out, his hand paw, whatever was resting near his chest. Fingers were long, tipped with nails that were more like thick, cracked keratin than anything sharp. Fur around them was thinner, matted. I put my hand on top of his. The heat surprised me. I expected cold, but he wasn't. Not yet. There was still warmth, still life. He made a sound. Not the low rumble from before, weaker, more broken, but the tone was the same. That soft, chesty growl that had always felt like contact. I'm sorry, I said, tears running down my face, hot tracks in cold air. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I yelled. I'm sorry you thought you had to do that for me. I'm sorry I liked it when you scared people. It all spilled out, years of it. The nights I'd felt comforted by those knocks. The secret part of me that had enjoyed seeing men with big egos get nervous near the trees. The way I'd never once told him no until it was too late. I was lonely, I said. You were lonely. We made something out of that loneliness and called it love. I don't know how long I talked. Time did that weird, stretchy thing again. Light shifted. Air got colder. My knees went numb, pressed into ground. At some point, his breathing slowed. I felt the change more than heard it. The rhythm that had been under everything since I walked in just faltered. He took one more breath, long, shuddering. His fingers twitched under mine. Our eyes met, and then he let go. There's no good way to describe the moment something that big stops being alive. It's not like with a person where you see the chest stop. With him, it was more like the whole forest exhaled. The tension in his muscles eased. Eyes lost focus. Not closing, just not seeing. The warmth under my hand faded slowly. I stayed, sat there in dirt, holding his hand until my legs cramped so bad I had to stand or fall over. Burying him felt like the only thing I could do. The ground there was softer than most places. Probably why he'd chosen it in the first place. Still, digging a grave for something his size was insane. I didn't do it perfectly. No way I could. I used a small folding shovel from my car. My hands. Anything. I widened the space beside the smaller mound, deepened it as much as I could before earth turned to stubborn roots and rocks. It wasn't big enough. It never could have been. In the end, I did what I could. I rolled him inch by inch, using momentum and gravity as much as muscle. It was clumsy, brutal. At one point, his arm flopped limply, and his hand hit my shoulder. The dead weight of it nearly knocked me over. I apologized to a body, to an empty shell, to myself. When he was as settled as I could get him, I started covering him. Fistfuls of dirt at first, then larger clumps. I broke up chunks with boots, kicked them down, smoothed them as best I could. I dragged fallen branches and moss over the top, arranging them in a rough mound matching the smaller grave. By the time I was done, it was full dark. I was filthy, covered in sweat, dirt, leaf bits, hands shredded, nails ripped. I don't remember any of that hurting at the time. I stood there panting, looking at the two mounds side by side, father and child, watcher and watched. "I don't know what you were," I said into the dark. "I don't know if anyone would believe me even if I told them." My breath came out in a cloud. Trees loomed silent. "Thank you," I said. "And I'm sorry. For both of us." On the walk back, I kept expecting footsteps behind me. A branch breaking. Some sign he wasn't the only one. There was nothing. The cabin loomed out of dark like a memory. I didn't go in. Walked straight past to the road, got in my car, drove back to town with dirt still under my nails. 8 years later. The confession. That was 5 years ago. Since then, my life has looked normal. More normal than any stretch before it. Mitchell Freight is stable. I go to meetings, do reports, see my parents separately for stiff lunches where we talk about weather and tax brackets. I haven't dated seriously since Derek. If you're wondering why, you're not listening. I still have the cabin. Send someone out twice a year to check on it. A contractor. Tell him to look for leaks, pests, usual stuff. He always reports back. Quiet out there. I don't ask him to walk past the cabin. Don't ask him to go to the clearing. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night and the road cuts close to tree line, I feel that old pressure. That sense something big could be pacing me just beyond headlights. Then I remember the mound of earth under the trees, and the feeling twists into something else. Guilt, grief, relief. They all sit in the same spot behind my ribs. Why I'm telling you this? I'm telling this now because I'm tired of keeping it to myself, and I don't want him treated like a joke. I have no proof. Just scars on my hands, an empty cabin, and 2 unmarked graves in the woods outside Snoqualmie, Washington. My life looks normal now, but sometimes a sound or smell takes me back, and for a moment, it feels like he's still watching over me. So here's my question for you. If something that powerful, that protective, that dangerous chose you out of everyone in the world, what would you do? Would you run? Would you stay? Would you bury the truth like I did? Or would you have the courage to tell someone sooner? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you feel anything, if it made you look twice at the tree line on your next drive, if it made you wonder what's out there in the dark watching us, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because I have more stories like this. Real confessions from real people who've seen things they can't explain. Things that science doesn't have answers for. Turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what's coming next. And share this video with that one friend who still thinks Bigfoot is just a guy in a suit. Send it to them. Watch their face change. Because after this, they won't be laughing anymore. That was 5 years ago. Since then, my life has looked normal. More normal than any stretch before it. Mitchell Freight is stable. I go to meetings, do reports, see my parents separately for stiff lunches where we talk about weather and tax brackets. I haven't dated seriously since Derek. If you're wondering why, you're not listening. I still have the cabin. Send someone out twice a year to check on it. A contractor. Tell him to look for leaks, pests, usual stuff. He always reports back, quiet out there. I don't ask him to walk past the cabin. Don't ask him to go to the clearing. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night and the road cuts close to tree line, I feel that old pressure. That sense something big could be pacing me just beyond headlights. Then I remember the mound of earth under the trees, and the feeling twists into something else. Guilt, grief, relief, they all sit in the same spot behind my ribs. The signs he left behind. But here's the thing nobody talks about when you lose someone like that, the signs don't stop. About 6 months after I buried him, I started finding things again. Not at the cabin. I wasn't going there. These were in town. The first time, I was walking to my car after a late night at the office. It was raining, that thin Seattle drizzle that soaks through everything. The parking lot was empty except for my sedan under a flickering streetlight. On my windshield, under the wiper blade, was a single white stone. Perfectly smooth, round, like the ones from the creek. My heart stopped. I looked around the parking lot. Nothing. Just rain and shadows and the distant hum of I-90. I picked it up. It was cold, wet, but the placement was too deliberate, too familiar. I told myself it was random. Kids? A prank. Coincidence. Then it happened again. A week later, I found 3 pine cones stacked on my apartment doorstep. Not scattered, stacked, one on top of the other, balanced like those stone towers he used to make. My hands shook as I knocked them over. The woman across the hall opened her door, saw me standing there staring at pine cones, and gave me that look, the one that says, "You okay?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just weird." She shrugged and went back inside, but I knew. Something was still leaving me gifts. The impossible question. Here's where it gets complicated. Because he was dead. I know he was dead. I felt the warmth leave his body. I buried him myself. Spent hours covering him with dirt and moss and branches. So either A, I was losing my mind, seeing patterns where there weren't any, assigning meaning to random objects because I couldn't let go. B, there was more than one. That second option kept me awake at night. What if he wasn't alone out there? What if there was a family, a group? What if I'd spent 25 years focused on one, never realizing there were others watching? What if they knew what I'd done? What if they blamed me for his death? Or worse, what if they were continuing what he started? The late-night visitor. The night I got my answer, I was working late at home. Laptop open on the kitchen table, spreadsheets glowing in the dark. It was past midnight. The pizza place downstairs had closed hours ago. I heard it before I saw anything. Tap, tap, tap. 3 knocks. On my second-story apartment window, my blood turned to ice. I lived on the second floor. There was no balcony. No fire escape on that side. Just a sheer drop to the alley below. Nothing should be able to knock on that window. I sat frozen, staring at my laptop screen. Every muscle locked. Tap, tap, tap. Slower this time. Almost. Gentle. My brain screamed at me not to look, to call the police, to run. But my body moved on its own. I stood, walked to the window, reached for the curtain. My hand was shaking so bad I almost couldn't grip the fabric. I pulled it back. Nothing. Just the dark alley below. Dumpsters. A streetlight 2 buildings down, casting long shadows. But on the windowsill on the outside of the second-story window were 3 stones. Smooth, creek stones, arranged in a perfect line. The security footage. The next morning, I went to the building manager. "Do we have security cameras?" I asked. He was an older guy, balding, always looked half asleep. He squinted at me over his coffee. "Just the front entrance." "Why?" "Someone was messing around outside my window last night." He frowned. "You're on the second floor." "I know. That's weird. You want me to call the cops?" "No. Just can I see the footage from last night? Around midnight?" He sighed but pulled up the system on his ancient desktop. We watched together. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. The camera covered the front entrance and part of the street. At 11:52 p.m., something crossed the frame. It was fast, blurry. The camera quality was garbage, but you could see it, a large, dark shape moving from left to right. Too tall to be a person, moving on 2 legs but wrong somehow. The proportions off. It was on screen for maybe 3 seconds. Then it was gone. The building manager leaned closer to the screen. "What the hell was that?" "Probably just someone in a coat," I said quickly. "Tall guy. Bad angle." He rewound it, played it again. "That's a really tall guy." "Yeah." We watched it 5 more times. Each time, my stomach twisted tighter. Finally, he shrugged. "Want me to save the clip?" "No," I said. "It's fine. Just keep an eye out, okay?" He nodded, already losing interest. I went back to my apartment and locked every window, drew every curtain. But I couldn't stop thinking about those 3 stones on the windowsill. They weren't from him. He was gone. So who or what was leaving them? The research obsession. After that night, I did something I'd avoided for 25 years. I started researching, not casually, not, "Let me Google Bigfoot and see what comes up." Obsessively. I joined forums, read every account I could find, watch documentaries, listen to podcasts where people shared their encounters. Most of it was garbage. Obvious hoaxes, attention seekers, people who saw something in the woods that was definitely just a bear. But buried in all that noise, there were others. Stories that sounded like mine. A woman in Oregon said she'd been visited for 15 years. She described gifts left on her porch, feathers, stones, bones arranged in patterns. She said she felt protected, that whenever she was in danger, she'd hear wood knocks in the forest nearby. Men who harassed her would suddenly stop. One ex-boyfriend who threatened her disappeared for 3 days, came back bloody and wouldn't talk about what happened. Her story ended the same way mine almost did. She tried to end it, told him to stop, moved away. 6 months later, the gifts started again. A man in Northern California said his wife had died in a hiking accident. After the funeral, He started finding her favorite flowers on his doorstep. Not planted, just left there. Fresh. Every week for 2 years. He investigated, set up cameras. The cameras caught nothing, but the flowers kept appearing. Finally, one night, he heard 3 knocks on his door. When he opened it, there was a massive handprint in the frost on his truck windshield. Too big to be human. 5 fingers, but the proportions were wrong. He moved to Arizona the next week. Desert. No forests, no trees. The gifts stopped. The theory. Reading these stories, a pattern emerged. They choose people, not random hikers. Not campers who stumble into their territory. Specific people. Usually lonely people. Isolated people. People who need something they can't get from other humans. They watch. They learn. They form. What? Bonds? Attachments? And once they choose you, they don't let go easily, even after death. But here's what terrified me most. Almost every story involved more than one. People would see their Bigfoot, the one they recognized, the one who'd been around for years, and then catch glimpses of others in the background. Watching, learning. One woman said it felt like she was being handed off. When her original visitor got too old or sick to make the trek to her house, another one took over. Younger, different build, but it knew her routines, left gifts in the same spots, like they were passing down knowledge, teaching the next generation who to watch over. The night everything changed. Again, 3 months ago, something happened that I can't explain. I was at the cabin. I know. I said I wouldn't go back, but Mitchell Freight was going through an audit. I needed space, quiet. The apartment was too loud, too close. So I drove out. It was early evening when I arrived. The cabin looked exactly the same, maybe a bit more weathered, but standing. I went inside, started a fire in the wood stove, made coffee. For an hour, it felt normal. Then the sun set, and I heard it. Wood knocks. Not 1, not 3, dozen, coming from all around the cabin. Near, far. Some so close they shook the walls. Others distant, echoing through the trees. It sounded like communication, like they were calling to each other. My heart was pounding. I grabbed the flashlight, went to the window, shone it into the yard. Eyes, multiple pairs, reflecting the light, scattered through the tree line. Different heights, different positions. I counted 7 pairs before my hands started shaking too bad to hold the light steady. They didn't move, didn't advance, just watched. For 10 minutes, I stood at that window, frozen. Then, all at once, the wood knock stopped. The eyes blinked out. Silence. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in a chair by the door with a kitchen knife in my lap until the sun came up. When I finally worked up the courage to step outside, I found them, gifts, everywhere. Stones piled on the porch steps. Feathers stuck in the doorframe. Branches arranged in symbols I didn't understand. And in the center of the yard, something that made my breath catch. A deer carcass, freshly killed, throat torn, placed carefully on the ground with the head pointing toward the cabin. An offering. What it meant. I'm not an expert, but I've read enough now to understand. They were acknowledging me. The death of one of their own, the one who'd watched me for 25 years, hadn't gone unnoticed. They knew. And they were. What? Honoring him? Honoring me? Continuing the tradition? Or claiming me? Because here's the thing that kept running through my mind as I stood in that yard staring at the dead deer. I never asked for this. I never chose him. And I definitely never agreed to belong to an entire group of them. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe when one of them chooses you, you become part of their world, their responsibility, their property. That thought made my skin crawl. The encounter that proved everything. 2 weeks ago, I had an encounter that answered every question I'd been avoiding. I was driving home from the office. Late, dark. The road that cuts through the foothills between Snoqualmie and the highway. You know, that stretch dense forest on both sides, curves you can't see around, no cell service. My headlights caught something in the road ahead. I slowed down, thinking deer. It wasn't a deer. A figure stood in the middle of the road. Massive, easily 8 feet tall, broad shoulders, long arms hanging at its sides. I slammed on the brakes. We were maybe 30 feet apart. My headlights lit it up completely. There was no mistaking what I was seeing. Dark brown fur. Human-like face, but broader, flatter. Eyes that caught the light and glowed amber. It didn't move, just stood there, staring at me through the windshield. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, my foot on the brake, Every instinct screamed, reverse, get out, run, but I couldn't move. We stared at each other for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds. Then it did something I'll never forget. It raised one hand slowly, deliberately, and pointed to the side of the road, not at me, past me, to the right side of the road, to the trees. Then it stepped aside, off the pavement, into the shadows, and vanished. I sat there, engine running, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. What the hell did that mean? Why did it point? What was it trying to tell me? I almost drove away, almost hit the gas and never looked back. But something, curiosity, stupidity, fate, made me pull over instead. What I found, I parked on the shoulder, left the headlights on, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, stepped out of the car. The forest was silent. No wind, no birds, no insects. Just that heavy, watching silence I'd known my entire life. I walked to where it had pointed. About 10 feet off the road, there was a gap in the trees, not quite a trail, just a space where you could push through. My flashlight beam caught something, a marker, not natural. Something had done this deliberately. Branches broken and arranged in an X. Stones piled in a line leading deeper into the forest. They were showing me the way. Every rational part of my brain screamed, don't. Don't follow random trail markers into the woods at night. Don't trust creatures that killed your ex-fiancé. But I'd spent 25 years wondering. 25 years living in the space between their world and mine. I needed to know, so I followed. The gathering. I walked for maybe 10 minutes. The trail markers continued, broken branches, stacked stones, crude symbols carved into tree bark. Then the forest opened up. A clearing, much bigger than the one where I'd buried him. And they were there. All of them. I counted 9. Maybe 10. Hard to tell because some hung back in the shadows. Different sizes, different builds. From what looked like juveniles maybe 6 feet tall to massive adults that had to be 9, 10 feet. They were arranged in a loose circle, and in the center of the circle was another mound. Fresh earth, recently disturbed. Branches and moss arranged on top. Another grave. My breath caught. One of the creatures stepped forward. The biggest one, older looking, graying around the face and shoulders. It looked at me, then looked at the grave, then back at me. It was waiting. For what? Permission? Acknowledgement? I didn't know what to do, so I did the only thing that felt right. I walked forward, slowly, hands out to show I wasn't a threat. The circle parted. Let me through. I knelt beside the mound, put my hand on the earth. I'm sorry, I whispered. My voice cracked. For all of it. For leaving. For not understanding. The big one made a sound. Low. Rumbling. Not threatening, almost like acceptance. Then, one by one, they stepped forward. Each one placed something on the grave. Stones, feathers, bones, flowers, pieces of bark with markings I couldn't read. They were honoring their dead, and they wanted me there. Wanted me to be part of it, because I'd been part of his life. So I was part of theirs. I stayed in that clearing for an hour, maybe longer. The creatures didn't leave. They Saturday stood, moved quietly around the edges. A few of the younger ones came closer, curious. One reached out and touched my jacket sleeve quick, gentle, then pulled back. They weren't monsters. They were people. Not human people, but people. With families, with grief, with rituals and traditions and ways of honoring their dead. And somehow, impossibly, I'd become part of their world. What happens now? I left that clearing around 2 a.m. They didn't follow me out. Didn't make any moves to stop me. The big one, the elder, I guess, just watched as I backed away, bowed my head once, it felt right, and walked back to my car. The trail markers were still there, guiding me out. When I got to the road, I turned back one last time. A figure stood at the tree line. Not threatening, just watching, making sure I got back safely. The same way he used to. I drove home in silence, didn't turn on the radio, didn't call anyone, just drove, trying to process what I'd seen. They weren't going to let me go. Not in a sinister way, not like captors or stalkers, but in the way family doesn't let you go. Once you're in, you're in. And I realized something that night that I'd been avoiding for 5 years. I didn't want them to let me go. The new normal. So here's where I'm at now. I go to the cabin once a month, always at night, always alone. I walk to the clearing, not the old one where I buried him, but the new one. The gathering place. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. But I always leave something. Apples, like Grandma Helen used to. flowers. Once, I brought a bottle of whiskey and poured it on the graves. Felt stupid doing it, but also right. The gifts keep appearing. On my apartment windowsill, on my car. Once, inexplicably, on my desk at work. I have no idea how that happened, and I don't want to know. I've stopped questioning it. Stopped being scared. This is my life now. CEO of a logistics company by day. Part of a Bigfoot family by night. Sounds insane when I say it out loud, but it's the truth. If you're watching this and thinking, wow, that sounds cool, I want that, stop. You don't? Yes, there are beautiful parts. The connection, the protection, the sense of never being truly alone. But there's a cost. You can't unknow them. You can't unsee them. You can't go back to normal life and pretend they don't exist. Every relationship you have will be affected. Every decision you make will be shadowed by the knowledge that something massive and powerful is watching. Dating? Forget it. How do you explain to someone why you disappear into the woods once a month? Why you keep finding weird gifts? Why there are enormous handprints in the frost on your car? Career? I'm lucky Mitchell Freight is family-owned and I'm the boss. Anyone else would have been fired for being unstable. Peace of mind? Gone. You'll spend the rest of your life wondering, are they watching right now? Are they listening? What happens if I do something they don't like? This isn't a fairy tale. This is a binding you can't break. The question that haunts me. Here's what keeps me up at night. Did he choose me? Or did I choose him? Was I special? Or was I just available? A lonely kid in the woods at the right time. If my parents hadn't fought so much, I think they'll bury me in that clearing, next to him, next to the others, part of the family, forever. Some people would call that beautiful. I call it the truth. I'm Sarah Mitchell, CEO, daughter, survivor, and the woman who buried Bigfoot with her own hands. This is my confession, and now it's yours too. Subscribe now for more real confessions. Turn on all notifications. Share this video if you dare. Comment your own paranormal experiences below.